So I have to make some bread today in my bread machine, and I figured that I would share the recipe that I'm using with everyone. And the main reason I want to make this video is because I had hesitated for a long time about using a bread maker. During COVID, when everyone was trying to make their own bread, I experimented with making bread from scratch by hand. I made some peasant bread and things like that. And I had always been curious about a bread machine, but I really didn't know if it was going to save any time, if it needed a lot of babysitting. So I hesitated on it for a long time. So for those of you who have been using one, you know, none of this is going to be news to you. This is for people who, you know, may be curious about how to use one and how much maintenance is involved. Because I purchased this a couple of months ago, used at a Goodwill for $7, and I'm thrilled with it. It's so easy, it saves me so much money and so much time, and I see them all the time in the thrift store that people get rid of them, and I'm not sure if they're getting rid of it because it's time consuming, it's not working out for their family, why they're always up for sale. But through trial and error, I figured out some tips and tricks on how to use mine to make it work better and easier, and so I wanted to make this video to share with people. Maybe you've tried one before and it hasn't worked out for you. So I just wanted to share what I've come to learn through having one and share this basic recipe that I'm using. So the machine that I bought it's a Hamilton Beach. I imagine they're all pretty similar, but I picked it up at the Goodwill. If you find one in the thrift store, you just want to make sure that you plug it in and make sure that it turns on and it's working. And they'll all have a pan inside, sort of like this, and it will have this paddle down there that does the mixing for you. So you just want to make sure that it has that paddle in it. And then you can go online and you can Google the owner's manual for the model number that you've picked up. And I was able to find mine, and it had recipes in it for all kinds of things. So the recipe I'm using today is just going to be for a basic 2-pound loaf. So if you have a machine, it may work in your machine as well. I think I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I think I'm going to make the dough and show you that process, and then after it bakes, I'm going to show you how I cut it and store it, and the second part of the process. So to get started, in the pan, it's important that you put all the ingredients in the order that they're given in the recipe, if you find it in your owner's manual or whether you're following the one I have. And we're going to start out by putting all of our dry ingredients into one corner of the pan on the bottom. And that's something that I learned from watching another video. It just helps the machine incorporate everything evenly. So the first thing that we're going to start out with for this recipe is 1.5 cups of warm water. The recipe just says water, but I use warm water to activate the yeast. And then following that, we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of salt, any kind of salt, and we're going to put that in the one corner that the paddle is facing. And then we're going to use 2 tablespoons of sugar. You could use granulated sugar, or probably any sweetener that you like. I did read something saying that the sugar does help aerate the bread. So the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons. I'm just using 1.5 tablespoons to try to cut that sugar a little bit. And like I said, I've been doing this for several months, and it always comes out good. And I haven't experienced any issues with the flavor or the consistency by cutting that sugar back a little bit. And then we're going to do a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil or butter. Any kind of vegetable oil that you like. I'm just using canola oil. I've used olive oil before. I'm sure coconut oil, anything like that would work. And then the recipe calls for 4½ cups of bread flour. I've always just used all-purpose flour to make this recipe, and it's worked fine. And what I usually do is 2½ cups of all-purpose white flour, and then 2 cups of whole wheat flour. But you can mix and match that however you like for your taste. You can do all of one, all of the other, just as long as you get a total of 4½ cups. So I'm going to start with the white flour, but it doesn't really matter what you put in first. And then this is the wheat. Okay, and then the last thing that it calls for is 1 3/4 teaspoons of bread machine yeast. I have never used bread machine yeast. I just use regular yeast. I actually bought this bag. It's 2025 right now. I actually bought this bag back in 2020 and have kept it in the freezer, and it still activates and it still works. So this is just regular yeast. It's not quick rising or anything. It's just regular bread yeast. And you put that in last, 1 3/4 teaspoons. Okay, now you're going to take it over to the machine, and it has a mechanism where you just sit it down into the machine and you twist it, and it locks into place. I'll try to do this so you could see. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I just set it down inside, and it just sits on a little circle, and then you twist it to lock it in place, and then it shouldn't move when you pull up on the handle. Okay. And then this is just the recipe for the default setting on this machine. And you turn it on. So if you can tell, this machine, it can do all kinds of different breads: basic, French, gluten-free, quick bread, sweet bread, express, dough, jam. You can make jam in here, cake, box cake mix, whole grain bread, and then bake. So I have tried to use the dough to make pizza dough, and that's worked out well. It's a little time consuming, but it does work out well. And then the jam is something that I'm looking forward to trying. But we're just making the default setting today. So we're doing, if you can see down here on the screen, the arrows on medium for medium crust. And then we're on setting 1, which is just the basic one up here for the bread. And then the other arrow over here for 2-pound loaf. You can also do a 1.5-pound loaf. There's a different recipe for that. And then it will go for 3 hours total. But the cool thing about this is you can just set it, and after initially just watching it just for the first minute, you can let it go and leave it, and it'll do its thing. I was concerned about, babysitting it, so I'll show you all that I do to get it started. So you're just going to hit start. And then you can open up the top and see what it's doing at first until it starts to rise. Until the cycle for rising begins, you're able to open the lid and see what it's doing. So the only thing that you're going to be checking for here is that it's wet enough, because different environments, you know, they call for different amounts of water when it comes to dough sometimes, and the recipe may or may not be enough. So I just watch it here for this first minute and see if it's all coming together, if it's grabbing the dry flour. And then I just have a little cup of warm water here to add if necessary, and a silicone spatula to scrape down the edges. You'll want something that doesn't scratch the inside of that pan because it's non-stick coated. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water into the corner. Handed. And then just start scraping down the edges. Kind of helping it along to form into a ball. And it's okay to leave a little bit of dry flour in the bottom. It will just, it'll come out after the loaf is cooked, but I generally like to try to make sure it's all incorporated together. And add a little more. It's grabbed everything pretty much off the bottom there. I might have added a little too much, but that's alright. And then once you see it coming together into a nice ball, you just put the lid down and let it do its thing, and then it'll be once in the middle of the cycle after the first rise, just for you to check it if you want to add anything to it. Some people, you know, like to add raisins or something, or nuts, depending on what kind of bread that they're making. I added a little too much water. I'm actually going to put a little more dusting of flour into that. But once it comes into a nice ball, you can just let it go. If you don't want to do anything to it, after that first beep goes off, you just let it keep running. It'll finish in 3 hours. And then I will say, in case you don't watch the second video, you do want to make sure that the loaf completely cools before you cut into it. Otherwise, it will get crumbly and it will fall apart. So you'll want to let it cool for several hours. I would say 3 hours minimum before you cut into it. And so this loaf, it'll come out as big as that pan inside. And what I generally do is slice it long ways down the middle and make it into 2 short loaves. And then I slice that into slices. I put each one into a Ziploc bag. I'll put one in the freezer until we're ready to use it, and the other one into the refrigerator, and we'll use the one in the fridge for the week, and then when that runs out, we'll pull the one out of the freezer. And I've never had one go bad on me or get moldy or anything doing it that way.